Margaret Sanger used to be a delivery manipulate activist, creator and nurse. Her efforts to popularize beginning manipulate led to the legalization of contraception and a progressive alternate in household planning. She installed the Planned Parenthood Federation of America and prompted George Pincus to improve the contraceptive pill. She is regarded the founder of the contemporary beginning manage movement. Margaret Sanger was once born in 1879 in Corning, New York. Her mother and father had been Irish American. Her mother, Anne, used to be Catholic, however. Her father Michael was once greater of a free thinker who grew to be an activist for women's suffrage. Her mom gave delivery 18 instances, 7 of whom died early. When she used to be solely 50 years historic, her mom exceeded away from tuberculosis. Margaret, who nursed her mom at some point of her ultimate years, felt the struggling of repeated childbirth contributed in the direction of her unwell fitness and early death. At her mother's funeral, she stated to her father, "You brought on this. Mother is useless from having too many children." Margaret attended St. Mary's College in Corning and was once embarrassed at her poverty and tattered apparel in contrast to her classmates. Seeking to get away the closed household lifestyles of her domestic town, she left Corning and studied to be a nurse in the Catskills. She won work as a nurse, touring slum housing on the east aspect of the city. The ride of journeying the slums illustrated the depth of poverty in America, and she grew to be lively in left-wing politics. She joined the New York Socialist Party and took phase in aiding industrial motion by way of hanging material workers. She additionally supported women's suffrage campaigns. Her work as a nurse additionally illustrated the influence of undesirable pregnancies on younger girls. She was once mainly involved about the risks of backstreet abortions, which have been frequent at the time. In her function as a nurse, she frequently had to deal with the penalties of younger female who visited backstreet unlawful abortions. Also, she had to nurse these female who couldn't come up with the money for the $5 for an unlawful abortion and tried rudimentary domestic strategies of abortion. It was once the sunrise of a new day in my life. Ellipsis. I went to mattress understanding that no depend what it would possibly value. I was once resolved or looking for out the root of evil, to do some thing to exchange the future of mothers, whose miseries had been as good-sized as the sky. Sanger, Autobiography 1938-92. She was once additionally taken aback at the lack of primary understanding amongst younger humans concerning sex, copy and sexuality. In response, she wrote open, frank articles which include what every girl should know. These had been posted in the Socialist Journal New York Call. Even for a radical left-wing magazine, her frank discussions of sexuality had been stunning to some readers, but additionally deeply preferred by using others. At the time, there used to be a first-rate taboo for speak me about sexuality and reproduction, and Sanger felt this lack of information induced misfortune, mainly for ladies who determine themselves with undesirable pregnancies. Birth_control_review in 1873, a federal Comstock regulation had outlawed any printed substances about contraception on the grounds of obscenity. Sanger realized that there was once no dependable records on contraception that should be located even at a neighborhood library. Under New York City regulation, it was once additionally unlawful to distribute contraceptives. Sanger claims that in one case a girl was once determined to keep away from pregnancy. However, the only recommendation given with the aid of a health practitioner was once for her husband to sleep on the roof. Sanger felt that offering expertise about start manipulate was once indispensable for releasing women, particularly in the poorer working class. She started a marketing campaign to venture federal legal guidelines banning any fabric on contraception. She posted pamphlets and newsletters, which gave data on how girls should undertake birth control, a tremendously new time period that she is credited with popularizing. In August 1914, she used to be charged with disseminating obscene fabric through the postal system, the obscene cloth being recommendation on contraception. Wishing to keep away from standing trial, she fled to England. In the subsequent year, her husband William Sanger used to be convicted for sending a replica of Family Limitation to an anti-vice politician. He spent 30 days in jail, and the trial raised contraception as a civil liberty issue. Birth manage is the first necessary step lady have to take towards the purpose of her freedom. It is the first step she ought to take to be man's equal. It is the first step they need to each take towards human emancipation. Morality and birth control. February to March 1918, in England, Sanger grew to become worried in the Neo-Malthusians movement. This was once a motion primarily based on the gloomy predictions of Thomas Malthus, that the world was once heading for overpopulation and this would lead to a decline in dwelling requirements and poverty. A key thing of Neo-Malthusian conferences used to be the desirability of merchandising beginning manipulate to limit populace growth. The goal for beginning manage used to be mainly targeted on poorer sections of society. In England, she additionally met fellow pioneers in the Start Manage movement. Marie Stopes requested for her recommendation on contraception. Stopes protected this in her groundbreaking intercourse guide, Married Love, 1918, which used to be influential in breaking taboos and bringing beginning manipulate into the wider public sphere. She additionally met Havelock Ellis, who used to be an influential determinant in advertising an extra permissive mind set towards sexuality. Woman should have her freedom, the vital freedom of selecting whether or not or no longer she shall be a mom and how many adolescents she will have. Regardless of what man's mindset may also be, that hassle is hers, and earlier than it can be his, it is hers alone. Chapter 8, Birth Control. A. Parents' problem or woman's? Sanger and Sons. Sanger with her two sons. Sanger used to be influenced with the aid of her supporters in Europe and additionally the information that most European nations had greater liberal legal guidelines on contraception. The imprisonment of her husband has additionally helped to swing public opinion in favor of her advertising of delivery control. Sanger again to New York and opened a household planning health facility in Brooklyn, New York. It used to be the first of its form and additionally worried breaking the law. Shortly after it was once opened, Sanger and her sister Ethel Byrne had been arrested. Out on bail, Sanger lower back to the sanatorium till she used to be arrested a 2D time, and additionally charged with being a public nuisance. Sanger was once arrested a whole of 8 instances in the course of her lifestyles for difficult the regulation on contraception. She argued it was once each a civil liberty for ladies to be in a position to pick out contraception and additionally critical for public health. At her trial in 1917, the Decide argued that ladies did now not have the proper to copulate with a feeling of protection that there will be no ensuing conception. She used to be provided a lenient sentence if she promised no longer to spoil the regulation again. However, she spoke back that she ought to now not agree with the regulation as it stood. She used to be sentenced to 30 days in a workhouse. The trial created tremendous media interest and additionally precipitated speedy boom in pastime in delivery control. Many presented their public help and monetary backing. In 1918, court docket lawsuits associated to her attraction led to a ruling that docs sought to prescribe contraception. It was once a foremost race for the marketing campaign on beginning control. After the First World War, Sanger allowed her socialist activism to lapse as she focused fully on start control. In 1921, she established the American Birth Control League, which sought a broad base of help for household planning and start control. The standards of ABCL had been based totally on a woman's proper to pick out when she would conceive a child. We preserve that kids need to be 1. Conceived in love, 2. Born of the mother's aware desire, 3. And solely begotten below stipulations which render viable the heritage of health. Therefore we preserve that each girl ought to possess the electricity and freedom to stop thought besides when these stipulations can be satisfied. Sanger started out a huge nationwide tour Speak Me to a various team of Americans from churchmen to women's golf equipment with the intention of bringing secure and fine beginning manage into American society. It used to be controversial and she skilled opposition from the Catholic Church and conservative-minded politicians. In 1929, she was once banned from talking in Boston. However, she stood on stage with a gag round her mouth and her speech was once studied out by using Arthur M. Schlesinger Sr. as an end result of her nationwide campaign. She obtained heaps of letters from female determined to keep away from undesirable pregnancies. She compiled these letters into a effective testimony of women's struggles in Motherhood in Bondage, 1928. She additionally wrote a number of books on start manipulate which include Family Limitation, Woman and the New Race and the Pivot of Civilization. These offered over 500,000 copies. She additionally posted 2 autobiographies, My Fight for Birth Control, 1931, and Margaret Sanger, an autobiography, 1938. Sanger was once antagonistic to abortion. She argued that if contraception used to be freely handy, the evil of abortion would now not be needed. That abortion used to be the incorrect way, no be counted how early it used to be carried out, it was once taking life. That contraception was once the higher way, the safer way. It took a little time, a little trouble, however it was once nicely really worth whilst in the lengthy run, due to the fact lifestyles had now not but begun. Eugenics in the 1920s, there used to be a robust eugenic motion which recommended for start manipulate as a way to enhance heredity human traits. Sanger argued that limiting pregnancies to the quantity that ought to be supported with the aid of folks would allow dad and mom to elevate more healthy children. On the contrary, the most pressing trouble these days is how to restriction and discourage the over-fertility of the mentally and bodily defective. The Eugenic Value of Birth Control Propaganda, October 1921. She expressed distaste for the aggressive nature of Nazi eugenics and donated to the American Council in opposition to Nazi propaganda. In 1929, she was once requested to set up a beginning manipulate health facility in Harlem via James Hubert, a black social worker. The co-founder of the NAACP W.E.B. Du Bois additionally served on the board. Sanger was once supportive of blended race initiatives at a time when segregation and racial discrimination used to be a effective pressure in America. However, when merchandising delivery control, she used to be inclined to work with these with racist views. In her autobiography, she stated she as soon as spoke to a women's auxiliary of the Ku Klux Klan. Sanger argued all people had a proper to recognize about start control, something their political affiliation. She additionally stated it was once her most weird trip in lecturing. Never earlier than had I regarded into a sea of faces like these. I was once positive that if I uttered one word, such as abortion, outdoor the regular vocabulary of these girls, they would go off into hysteria. and so my tackle that nighttime had to be in the most basic terms, as even though I have been attempting to make youth understand. Margaret Sanger, an autobiography, 1938. In 1929, she additionally launched a marketing campaign to overturn federal law on banning contraception. When the marketing campaign failed, she determined to venture the regulation through importing diaphragms from Canada. The diaphragms had been confiscated via the U.S. government. Sanger challenged the confiscation and in 1936 a courtroom case United States versus one package of Japanese pessaries overturned the confiscation and held that the regulation have to now not be used to intercept shipments originating from a doctor. By the subsequent year, the American Medical Association started out, along with contraception as a everyday scientific service. She additionally traveled overseas to share the standards of beginning manage in Japan, China and Europe. In 1935, she traveled to India to attempt and persuade Mahatma Gandhi to alternate his abstinence-only method to contraception. In China, she located that a technique of start-manipulate used to be infanticide and there used to be a magnificent starvation for understanding on contraception. But at some point of all the lengthy years this remember has been discussed, advocated, refuted, the humans themselves, poor human beings especially, were blindly, desperately working towards household limitation, simply as they are working towards it today. To them start manage does no longer imply what it does to us. To them it has supposed the most barbaric methods. It has supposed the killing of babies, infanticide, abortions, in one crude way or another. My Fight for Birth Control. 1931, webpage 133. In 1948, she helped to discover the International Committee on Planned Parenthood. She served as president till 1959. On the home front Sanger stepped down from taking part in such a dominant function. In opposition to her wishes, the Birth Control Council of America modified its title to Planned Parenthood Federation of America. Sanger moved to Tucson, Arizona, and no matter decreasing her workload, she was once nonetheless a most important discern inside the household planning movement. Role in growing the contraceptive pill. One of her most vast moves in the direction of the give-up of her existence used to be her function in encouraging funding for the work of biologist Gregory Pincus to improve the beginning manage pill. For a lengthy time, Sanger had dreamt of a easy capsule which would grant fantastic contraception to women. In 1953, Sanger and her rich buddy Catherine McCormick met Gregory Pincus, and this enabled him to make bigger the scope of his research. By 1960, the contraceptive tablet went on the market, bought below the trade name Enovid, and this radically altered start manage and attitudes to sex. In 1965, the Supreme Court subsequently overturned the historic Comstock laws that prohibited contraception. In the case Griswold v. Connecticut, 381 U.S. 479, 1965, the courtroom dominated. The statute used to be unconstitutional on the grounds it violated a proper to marital privacy. Death. 12 months later, on the 6th of September 1966, aged 87, she died from congestive coronary heart failure at her domestic in Tucson, Arizona. She married twice. In 1902, architect William Sanger. They had 3 children. Her daughter, Peggy, died when she used to be 4. Her 2 sons had been known as Grant and Stewart. In 1922, she married a 2D husband, James Noah H. Slee. Legacy. Margaret Sanger made a top-notch distinction to attitudes on contraception and household planning. Throughout the 20th century, start quotes fell dramatically as female selected to restrict the quantity of young people they bore. As delivery charges fell, existence Expectancy additionally rose. It is tough to think about simply over 50 years ago, there had been federal legal guidelines banning contraception and even pamphlets speak me about contraception. Martin Luther King stated of Margaret Sanger, "She was once inclined to take delivery of scorn and abuse till the fact she noticed used to be published to the millions." At the flip of the century she went into the slums and set up a start-managed clinic, and for this deed she went to prison due to the fact she was once violating an unjust law. Yet the years have justified her actions.